Hello and welcome to The Top Story, the podcast with the headlines of the day from our correspondents around the world. I'm Siju. Coming up in this edition, Turkiye has launched strikes on Kurdish militants after blaming them for an attack that killed 5 people at a defense company in Ankara. Hezbollah has issued a statement mourning its top official Hashem Safieddine, who died in an Israeli strike. And Chinese President Xi Jinping has made a 5-point proposal for the future of BRICS. We begin in Turkey. Ankara is blaming Kurdish militants for an attack that killed at least 5 people and wounded 22 others at a defense company in the Turkish capital. The Defense Ministry says the Air Force has hit Kurdistan Workers' Party targets in northern Syria and Iraq in retaliation. Mihail Badavid has more from Istanbul.
Turkish officials announced that the attack and the operation following the attack at the Turkish aerospace industry's headquarters near Ankara had ended. They also announced that 2 terrorists had been neutralized. These assailants were seen on CCTV footage with heavy arms, with assault rifles and carrying backpacks as well. In a statement made late on Wednesday evening, the Interior Minister stated that according to initial evaluations, the Turkish government believes the Kurdistan Workers' Party, the PKK, is most likely behind this attack. Now, the PKK is considered a terrorist organization according to Turkey, the EU, and the United States. Prosecutors have launched an investigation. The Turkish aerospace industries is one of Turkey's most important defense and aviation companies. It produces the country's first national combat aircraft. Meanwhile, the White House has condemned the attack, and NATO's Secretary General has also expressed solidarity with Turkey.
That was Mihail Badavid in Turkey. Turning to the Middle East, Hezbollah has confirmed that an Israeli airstrike killed its top official Hashem Safieddine. Safieddine had been leading Hezbollah alongside Deputy Secretary General Naim Qassem since the assassination of former leader Hassan Nasrallah. He served as head of the group's executive council and took on a prominent role in speaking for Hezbollah during recent hostilities with Israel. His killing further weakens the group's leadership as Israeli strikes continue in Hezbollah strongholds in southern Lebanon. Yasser Hakim reports.
These attacks have led to the destruction of a lot of buildings. We understand 5 residential buildings and monuments. Also has a population of 200,000 people. Now, a lot of them had already been displaced because of the previous attacks by Israel. But the problem is that from other areas of southern Lebanon, a lot of people have been displaced to Tyre, because Tyre was only not targeted a couple of times only and have been left really calm throughout the last couple of weeks. So many people moved from the border villages in southern Lebanon. Another wave of people moving to other cities, causing another issue, a crisis for the displaced refugees inside their own country, trying to find homes, many of them living in cars or in the streets, tents and so forth. We've been told by the officials we have interviewed in the last week how the infrastructure cannot stand weeks, not months of war. And they're pushing for a ceasefire. But obviously the casualties are increasing. The health ministry says the casualties have exceeded 2,500 and 155 health workers have been killed as well. So it's a deteriorating situation, not just in Beirut, but the whole of Lebanon.
That was Yasser Hakim on the Middle East tensions. In the U.S. presidential election, Wisconsin could see a razor-thin margin between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. In the 2016 election, Trump became the first Republican to win the battleground state since Ronald Reagan in 1984. Dan Williams spoke to voters there.
On the outskirts of Milwaukee, in the battleground state of Wisconsin, LaToya Harris delivers leaflets encouraging residents to vote. This is Franklin Heights, a largely African-American neighborhood.
Hi, how are you doing?
Harris works for Power to the Polls, an organization focused on motivating black and brown residents to vote. Some here have already cast their ballot.
I already voted.
You already voted?
You sent in my ballot yesterday.
We're trying to get everybody out here to really vote and come together because we don't want no one to feel like their vote don't count. Because that's how a lot of people feel, as if their vote don't count or as if they don't matter. So our job out here knocking on these doors is really make people feel like they matter, like they count.
Harris believes the key issue for many here is the increased cost in housing.
Affordable housing is definitely an issue because all our rent is going skyrocket over the last 2 years. It went from probably $800 to now $1,500 in less than 2 years.
Harold Turner is the owner of the Milwaukee Times, situated in the historically black neighborhood of Bronzeville. He says for many here, the key issue is a lack of good-paying jobs.
Most people, what they are facing is probably economic situation. They really are living from one paycheck to the other. I do believe if we could get more jobs, our community would turn itself around. You wouldn't even know the community.
Like many US states, Wisconsin is experiencing deep political division. According to a recent Marquette Law survey, almost half of those polled in Wisconsin had stopped talking to someone about politics because of the upcoming presidential election. And even though urban areas tend to lean Democrat, while rural areas favour Republicans, both regions share economic concerns. Known as the Dairy State, nearly half of Wisconsin's dairy farms have closed over the last 10 years. And after seeing record profitability in 2022, US agriculture is experiencing a downturn amid low commodity prices. Stephen Deller is an economics professor at the University of Wisconsin-Madison.
Farmers are used to this, though. They're used to this kind of boom-bust cycle. And a lot of farmers are able to kind of make plans in order to ride through these boom-bust cycles. We run into a problem, though, when that bust kind of extends into 3, 4, 5 years. Then there's real stress on the agricultural side.
The latest polls show the Wisconsin race is statistically tied. Both candidates know time is running out to win over voters.
Now to Stan Williams on the US presidential race in a swing state of Wisconsin. In Africa, the head of the United Nations Refugee Agency says the organization is committed to helping Uganda with its open door policy for refugees. Uganda is the biggest refugee hosting country in Africa. Recent arrivals from Sudan have shot the refugee population in the country to 1.7 million. Isabel Nakia reports.
The visit of the United Nations Refugee Chief Filippo Grandi comes at a time when the country is struggling to cope with huge numbers of refugees from Sudan. Uganda is recording almost 10,000 new arrivals every month, but resources are running dry. Grandi applauded Uganda for keeping its doors open to asylum seekers, but encouraged greater refugee skills development to enable self-sustenance.
Going on, we need to push for humanitarian assistance, but we need to accelerate the self-reliance so that we don't depend so much as we did for food aid on humanitarian assistance.
Grandi spoke to some Congolese refugees at the Ramwanja refugee settlement involved in money-making projects and said, going forward, a big chunk of funding should be directed to skills development. Uganda's disaster ministry called on the refugee agency to support voluntary return of refugees for those who feel safe to open room for the new asylum seekers.
The solution for the refugees is basically voluntary return to their country or repatriation back to their countries. Of course, if there are countries who need refugees like so, we shall be happy to offload some of them to those countries so that they can also have additional population. Places like Canada.
The UN says the Uganda refugee response is one of most underfunded globally and more support is urgently needed. Less than 50% of the required $517 million budget for this year has been funded, leaving a substantial shortfall. This is severely impacting on the ability to provide essential services, impacting livelihoods.
That was Isabel Nakia in Kampala, Uganda. Finally, on the 2024 BRICS summit in Russia, Chinese President Xi Jinping has made a 5-point proposal for the future of BRICS, calling on members to build a peaceful, innovative, growing and just BRICS with closer people-to-people exchanges. In his address at the group's summit in Kazan, President Xi stressed that China is willing to work with the other BRICS members to open a new chapter in high-quality Greater BRICS cooperation to build a community with a shared future. The gathering in Russia is the first since the group expanded from 5 to 10 members early this year. Zhao Yunfei has more.
A new family photo with leaders representing the world's top emerging economies. In the first summit after BRICS welcomed 5 new members. President Xi Jinping called on all parties to make the right choices and promote world peace.
当前，世界进入新的动荡变革期。
As the world enters a new period defined by turbulence and transformation, we're confronted with pivotal choices. Should we allow the world to descend into the abyss of disorder and chaos, or should we strive to steer it back on the path of peace and development? The more tumultuous our times become, the more we must stand firm at the forefront, exhibiting tenacity, demonstrating the audacity to pioneer, and displaying the wisdom to adapt so as to jointly write a new chapter of high-quality development of Greater BRICS cooperation.
President Xi stressed 5 key areas of development under the BRICS, including cooperation in security, innovation, sustainable development, global governance, and people-to-people exchanges. China has been playing an active role in recruiting new members to BRICS. And now, with a greater BRICS, President Xi Jinping said China is committed to collaborating with other parties to kickstart a new era for the global South. The BRICS member countries now share 45% of the world's total population, and its GDP has increased to around 35%. President Xi said the increase is a landmark event in the evolution of the international situation. China calls on all parties to contribute to the high-quality development of BRICS cooperation and push forward for a community with a shared future for mankind.
That was Zhao Yunfei in Kazan. Now, recapping the headlines, Turkiye has launched strikes on Kurdish militants after blaming them for an attack that killed 5 people at a defense company in Ankara. Hezbollah has issued a statement mourning its top official Hashem Safieddine, who died in an Israeli strike. And Chinese President Xi Jinping has made a 5-point proposal for the future of BRICS at its summit in Russia. And that's it for this edition of The Top Story, a podcast that brings you world headlines every weekday. For more news in politics, business, sports and culture, you can subscribe to the Beijing Hour, a 1-hour podcast news magazine program. We welcome and appreciate all ratings and reviews. I'm Xi Zhi. Thanks for listening.